With 3 movies, multiple TV shows, and a few video games in addition to the original books, the How to Train Your Dragon franchise is really the gift that keeps on giving. But how well do you keep up with the movies? In today's video, we'll cover 20 details you've probably missed in How to Train Your Dragon. Starting off at number 1, we have the fact that Gobber the Belch was always opposed to killing dragons. At every stage of the first movie, you see him taking on a role that distances him from fighting dragons. He works in the forge and trains the kids instead of joining missions like the other men. But even more importantly, think about how Gobber trains the young Vikings. His lessons are focused more on self-defense and control than actually killing dragons. We also saw Gobber quickly developing a very close relationship with his dragon compared to older Vikings like Stoic, indicating that he had a soft spot for dragons all along. The second interesting fact you might have missed about Gobber is a subtle joke he makes in the first movie. When he's chatting with Stoic, the blacksmith claims that trolls are real and they steal socks, but only the left ones for some reason. Now, this doesn't make sense at first because there's no such thing as left or right socks, but the depth of that joke becomes much clearer when you realize that Gobber only has a left leg. The third detail of our list is that Hiccup actually gets his ingenuity from Valka. I think it was pretty obvious that Hiccup took after his mother as opposed to Stoic, but we only reached that conclusion based on their connection with dragons. However, if you look at how Valka survived on the bewilderbeasts island with no tools or other humans and even constructed a staff with a whistling effect to summon Cloudjumper, you realize that her innovative spirit is just as strong as Hiccup's. Speaking of Valka and bewilderbeasts, the fourth detail you might have missed is the fate of the berserker bewilderbeast and her egg from Race to the Edge. At some point in the story, the dragon is moved to Valka's sanctuary, but we never really see her later on in the series or in the movies. This is a pretty big detail as well, since bewilderbeasts are the natural alpha species, so we don't really know how it could have affected Toothless's reign or the alpha lineage after him. But at number 5, let's take a look at the other living bewilderbeast in the How to Train Your Dragon universe, Drago's bewilderbeast. We don't really know much about Drago's fate at the moment, but we do see the former alpha dragon for a few seconds in the hidden world as he bows down to accept Toothless as the new leader of the dragons. Now, while Toothless's character arc ends with him growing to be a leader, a husband, and a father, at number 6 we have the fact that he was not always this way. Unlike other dragons, Toothless is solitary and brooding, suggesting that there might even be a hint of evil in him. Thankfully, he meets Hiccup and the two enter a friendship that ends up smoothing out both of their rough edges. But for number 7, I want to take a step back from Hiccup meeting Toothless and point out how the Night Fury operated when the Red Death was in power. Every other dragon was practically hypnotized and hunting for food, but Toothless famously never took anything from the villages, only flying in to shoot down catapults and other weapons. This means that Toothless probably wasn't hunting on the Red Death's orders and only joined the raids to protect his fellow dragons. Now, this brings us to the 8th detail you might have missed, which is that Hiccup and Toothless are thematically the same character in the first movie. Just like how Toothless has no friends or family, Hiccup is also neglected by his own father and can't connect with any of his peers. However, both characters have unique skills that make them extremely valuable to their kind and prove themselves to be natural leaders halfway through their character arcs. At number 9, we have another interesting storytelling device based on Toothless and Hiccup. If you really think about it, the franchise actually contains a message of overcoming disabilities and showing how support can go a long way in doing that. Toothless loses his tail fin, which makes him basically flightless, and without his leg, Hiccup would technically be restricted to the island just like Gobber. However, by relying on each other and their friends, Hiccup and Toothless managed to reach the pinnacle of the dragon and Viking worlds, demonstrating that a physical disability is never a limiting factor. Sticking with the theories about Toothless, let's move on to detail number 10, which is that Night Furies use drawing as a way to show affection. There's that one scene in the first movie where Toothless draws in the sand to bond with Hiccup, but something similar happens when he encounters the Light Fury as well. Now, we don't exactly know why Toothless prefers to be affectionate through drawings, but that's a theory for the superfans to explore. Speaking of the Light Fury, there are a couple of interesting observations about her as well. At number 11 on our list, you probably missed the fact that despite her impact on the story, the Light Fury never gets a name. Think about it, dragons of her stature and rarity normally get a nickname at least, so the Light Fury just completely being passed up is a major miss in the franchise that even most fans didn't really notice. At number 12, we have another interesting fact about the Light Fury, which is that she's not actually the last of her kind. When we see Toothless and the Light Fury getting together, it feels endearing as the two outcasts finally find a partner. But the Light Fury isn't actually an outcast, as we see quite a few of them in the hidden world. Now, if you hadn't noticed this, it could take away from some of the emotional weight of their relationship, but there's also the fact that Toothless may find a community of his own. 13 on our list is another key plot point from the third movie, which is that Grimmel is an unreliable narrator. Think about it, his whole identity is claiming that he hunted the Night Furies to extinction while Toothless was alive all along. So if Grimmel was wrong once, why are any of his other claims any more believable? Given that he barely manages to hunt down Toothless, it's very likely that he didn't hunt down many Night Furies aside from the one he originally killed. Moving on from one of the most hated people in the franchise to the most loved, at number 14 we have the fact that Fish Legs has almost godly physical capabilities. At first we see him as just an awkward overweight kid, but later we see him barreling through groups of Vikings and even wrestling dragons. But what's even more crazy is that he takes a full dose of dragon venom from Grimmel in the third movie and somehow survives, which is pretty crazy. Speaking of dragon venom, this brings us to a super interesting detail at number 15, which is that Death Grippers are perhaps the only dragons that aren't immune to their own weapon. Hideous Zibblebacks are immune to their gas, and monstrous nightmares are fireproof, but for some reason, Death Grippers can be controlled using their own venom. Speaking of unusual dragons, at number 16 we have a super disturbing observation. Did you realize that some dragons are cannibalistic? In the first movie, we see the Red Death eating a Gronkle whole, but that might have just been a power move. However, in Race to the Edge, we learn that dragons like Skuldrins and Death Songs actually go out of their way to hunt and eat other dragons. This means that the world of dragons is far more brutal than we think, and it's not only fish and sheep that need to watch their backs. At number 17, we have another interesting detail about our perception of the dragons, which is that the shot limits assigned to dragons in the Dragon Guide are probably just straight up wrong. In some cases, like the Gronkle, Fish Legs does demonstrate that the shot limit of 6 is actually true, but Toothless routinely fires over 10 shots without taking a break to recharge after major antagonists. While this seems like an innocent mistake at first, you have to wonder how many Vikings got sent to their deaths because of faulty data in the Dragon Manual. Speaking of inconsistencies, at number 18 we have a detail that really bothered me while watching the second movie. The Vikings discover Hiccup's helmet floating in the sea after he's abducted by Valka, but how does that work? The helmet is made up of iron and leather, neither of which float in water. This is probably something that just completely slipped the producers' minds, but it's still a pretty odd detail. Our final 2 points are about the creation of the movies themselves. Number 19 is super rare for franchises of this size, but did you realize that the 3 films were distributed by 3 different companies? The first movie was handled by Paramount Pictures, but then 20th Century Fox took over distribution for How to Train Your Dragon 2. By the time DreamWorks finished up work for The Hidden World, they actually moved on to a third distributor in the form of Universal Pictures. And our final detail at number 20 is something that you definitely missed if you didn't pay attention, but Tough Nut's voice actor changes during the movies. While T.J. Miller voiced Tough Nut for the first 2 movies, he had been dropped because of multiple criminal charges against him, with Justin Rupel taking on the role in The Hidden World. And that wraps up our list of things you might have missed from the How to Train Your Dragon franchise. Which of these shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments down below. See ya! Bye!